And do you think then, Nigel, that there is a skills gap that can be filled by economies of scale through said third parties?
Absolutely. We only have to look at what's happening in the industry right now. The demand for cyber skills particularly is, there's a complete dearth of available cost-effective skills out there. And we got organizations still following traditional models. They're trying to build internal cyber teams, and it's just not going to scale. The other side of that coin is we're in a very dynamic digital economy that is picking up momentum and driving change a lot faster. And organizations need to really start getting on board with the fact that for them to maintain agility in their sector, and this is across all sectors, they're going to need to enhance their approach to cyber and focus on what they do best and outsource the rest. That sounds a bit corny there, but it's true. And organizations first, they need to embed cyber as a core part of their cultural DNA. And if they're not doing that today, and that's from board right the way down into the basement IT. I know IT doesn't always live in the basement. So embedding that as part of their cultural DNA is fundamental, because if they don't, as far as I'm concerned, these organizations, doesn't matter how big, how long they've been around, they are still in beta. And the only way they're going to be able to scale and adapt and introduce new services, flip those services with speed, is through partnership. That partnership, core to that, is going to be managed security service providers.
Which is a topic I like to look at quite frequently, mainly because I can see physical security managed service providers and IT managed security service providers working more closely together. So, Neil, when we're talking convergence, today we've talked a lot about whether or not we're really talking about collaboration, and not one lofty collaboration word, but more actually having projects together. Is this real, or is this still in the buzzword phase?
I think the industry's changed dramatically, over the last decade, one way or another. And these days, at this particular point, we talk about collaboration, and it would be lovely, right, to think that everyone's going to collaborate very nicely with everybody. That is the Shangri-La in all reality, from a tech vendor working with another tech vendor to a client. And we always have the problem with who owns that relationship, or a predominant relationship with that client. I think the client now is in an ideal situation, whoever consumes the technology is it's luxurious in the fact that you've got such a wide range of products and services from everyone that can be delivered to you singularly. But the problem is that the client doesn't want to manage a multiple vendor relationship reality, in all fairness, because it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult for them. They need to skill up as well to some degree. I would say that the whole market is moving forward to that more broker model for a technology company. So, as Nigel rightly said, keep your key strengths, core business values. That's what it is. You don't have to divert outside of that and run the risk of tripping up over your own feet at a client's expense.
No, that is a good point. But then it brings up a question in my mind, and maybe I'll ask you, Ian, about accountability. In that, if you partner with a physical security vendor for some reason, it's not your company, but it's your customers. So how do we keep our specialism, but make these partnerships work?
So I think that's down to the skills of the managed service provider. I think they've got to demonstrate credibility, integrity. They've got to have that sort of capability of bringing in the kind of skills and specialisms that they've done the groundwork behind the scenes before going to the customer and presenting those different solutions to the customer, recognizing that, this seminar conference that we're doing today is all about convergence. And, back 10 years ago, we were talking about convergence of telephony, IP type systems, and IT getting involved. So now we're moving to IoT, and how security providers and vendors can now integrate and provide a cohesive solution to a customer that allows you to actually have greater insight to all of the devices that are connected to the network and offer a greater security capability overlying all of that.
And that may be become as commonplace as telephony and IT in the future.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. At some point it will be commoditized. However, at the moment it's quite highly specialized. And you saw that back 10 years ago where convergence of telephony was quite specialized at the time. Now it is just a commodity. You can buy it through Microsoft. You can buy it through lots of different VIA and different systems where they're all application layer and IP based systems, and IT companies are delivering those solutions.
Which means maybe IT companies are better placed for other things like cameras.
For sure.
Which at the moment I know, maybe the small 50-mile radius MSP out there in the world may not want to touch CCTV. In fact, they probably don't. But Nigel, this IT and OT convergence, would you say that there are some people out there trying to tackle it, but maybe they're trying to tackle IT or OT, and we've got to find a way to track threats across IT and OT?
It's an education thing. You find OT moving at a very different cadence to IT-based systems. OT invariably has almost a human generational life cycle, if not longer, whereas IT is almost 18 months sometimes. So when you've got that disparity of evolution within those ecosystems, you've immediately got a challenge, because as you bring them together, you're going to, on a daily basis, have challenges without a substrate in place that allows insulation, particularly to the weaker brethren, the OT, and providing a mechanism whereby organizations can, in a structured way, stub off, still get that harmonization between the two systems that do that securely. And that requires specialization. And this talks partly to the theme of the last question, and that's where I think there is a place for those smaller organizations, those specialists, because that's exactly the kind of support companies require today. Because as other organizations move with the current tide of IT, a lot of this legacy, as we refer to it, and some of it isn't actually legacy, it's still very current, but it's built for a different age. It still needs to be looked after. So there's an opportunity for domain experts. And the key for their involvement in the new economy is P2P, partner to partner, to build into their business model a recognition of that is what is going to be key. How can they partner seamlessly, communicate in a mature partner-to-partner manner with other organizations and demonstrate that to the customer base? Because customers are looking for that now. Without that maturity, you end up with siloed vendors. Some of the big SIs and tier ones are actually very bad at this because they actually try to get the whole pie. And it's not sustainable, that model. And working in a collaborative mode is going to be the way forward. Now, unless your whole supplier base gets on board with that, it becomes a challenge for the customer. But the customers are becoming wired to this, and organizations that can show an agile P2P are going to be the ones that are going to be able to adapt and service those disparate technology divides.
Which, and you wouldn't know this, but this is what I was talking to Ben Patience about before, where we thought of convergence as value adding, as opposed to convergence of IT and OT and especially physical security. It's all value. And Neil, I'll be interested in your thoughts, because some people in the security world don't appreciate that MSPs and MSS are business-minded people. So they're looking to add more value. They're looking to grow their business. Do you think that more of the channel will get excited about traditionally physical security offerings?
physical security offering.
Yeah, I don't mean man guarding just yet.
Just like bodyguards.
No, well, no,
guns.
yeah, don't laugh. It could turn a nice profit. I don't know. But what I mean is CCTV, access control, biometrics. There are some solutions out there that say fire and forget. You're never going to have to come back to me. I'll do it all for you. Okay, but what are your thoughts? Is a channel going to get excited about that?
Well, I think that the channel are going to go very nervous about it because they wouldn't want responsibility of until the whole data privacy laws have been addressed on what they can and can't access or what should be allowed to. And CCTV is a real grey area, and a hot potato of who looks after that recording. Like, where are you going to put it? Is it secure enough? I worked with a very well-known council on one project where they had CCTV issues in the fact that they outsourced it to a huge company beginning with A, and it wasn't really secure at the time. And there was terabytes and terabytes of CCTV being streamed into the cloud, onto servers, really secure. It's all been addressed now, but it goes to the point where what we were talking about before, and Nigel, you've got companies trying to do everything, and they can't, and they shouldn't. But in business, like it is a commercial venture. We need to make money, and that's the reality of it. At the end of the day, people tend to dabble in things that are not their core skills, but they might be a really nice to have for one of their clients. They've done it a few times, really. And so that becomes the mainstay in the service they provide. Personally, the future should be, and I think if anybody here wants to give me some seed capital, I've proven the model. I can create, or anyone in this room or outside this room can create a born on the cloud security services provider, binding in all of the latest security items and products, and create my own service, whether it's hosted in wherever it is. I'm not going to name any names, but you're responsible for that security, right? And you apply that security around that data. Now, I would then take that and create a service that will actually encompass all the big trend and issues in information security today. And I'd just be a broker for that technology. I will manage that. I will make sure that works as it should, from a NOC point of view, straight service delivery point of view. And actually, I wouldn't charge much more over the cost in all reality, because I'll be doing very little. And see, this is where I think the market will go, is born on the cloud providers like that, where actually we don't have to own and manage stuff anymore. And it doesn't make any sense to do that with all the sustainability challenges, and let alone the financial challenges and all the other bits that go behind having a huge IT service business. They need that. You do the best and best, put it on the cloud, and with the right guidance and strategy, you'll be very successful, and you'll be a unicorn in 3 years.
All right. Well, why not? Ian, what are your thoughts? Unicorn in 3 years.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
it's already in. It's all in with me. Go on, Ian, let's start it tomorrow.
I think conceptually, obviously it can work, but I think in reality, I think people are looking for demonstrability, capability, and I think security is really important to get right. Security, whether it's physical or whether it's cyber security, is something that we specialize in. But what I do see is that, talking about trying to be fearful of GDPR and privacy rules and all this kind of stuff, unfortunately, the genie's out the bottle. And there are so many companies developing AI-based systems around CCTV surveillance. And how do you then incorporate that into data networks so that you can actually build out greater insight into what's going on in your business? And I'm talking about organizations that have hundreds, if not thousands, of maybe retail branches, and particularly those who are looking at footfall and trying to get greater insight into what's going on in the markets. And we're currently working with a technology vendor at the moment with these new cashierless retail units, where you can just literally go in and buy things on your iPhone and so forth. There's no one in there, and that's what's going to happen in the world, is that there's going to be greater technology, greater need for integration and convergence of security solutions, wrapping up what would be traditional CCTV type solutions into a greater integrated type of platform. So there's more application integration and more application usage into insight in what's going on in the business, both from a data and from a physical security capability as well.
Which then hopefully would enable us to ask the next question, which I'll give to Nigel. Does that make the MSS or MSSP or SMSP, does it make them the ultimate glue that holds everything together? Because all throughout today, we've said, is this the glue? Is that the glue? What is the glue? It sounds to me like whatever shape the MSS takes, that's the glue.
I think it's fungible, and it has to be. We're in an evergreen world. Talk to cloud. It's not a panacea. It's definitely part of the solution. Some of you will remember we used to talk about client server. That used to be something we used to lead with in conversations because it was a thing. Cloud now is almost becoming passé, and if you're making that a core lead-in from a marketing perspective, actually you're starting to show your age to some degree. We're not quite there, but in terms of the glue, I think the MSS is definitely part of that, and it's down to the agility and ability of that MSS to maintain cadence with currency with those changing landscapes. And cloud is driving it. It's the efficiency, it's the natural abstraction of where organizations are now outsourcing. You've heard the term credit card cloud. Businesses are circumventing IT and going straight to the cloud because they need a CRM system, because they got an opportunity in the market and they need to collaborate. It's happening there. You're not going to genie in the bottle, out of the bottle, definitely. So the MSS is the guy who's close enough to that cold face with the broad surface area onto their customer base to be able to take real value into each customer with that broad perspective. And that's where I see the MSS having the edge here, because they've just got all that insight, that added value experience they can bring and land on an individual basis.
Maybe coupled with such a skills gap that you've got to share.
Back to that original.
Back to the future, no less, really.
It is, and I think the skills gap is something that's just going to get worse. AI, ML, I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to that.
Yeah, but the promise of it is that the tools will be so easy that anyone can upskill. The promise of the AI.
Abstraction, I'm sure we'll get there at some point.
Yeah, if I said, Neil, you have to compile your own code, you'd be like, no, it does it itself, right? I don't have to write in binary. And this is actually something that came up 3 times today, that maybe technology will take us to a level like we don't need a typewriter, we have Word, and now everybody can do PowerPoint. Do you think that the real convergence will come when we don't think of a lot of these cyber skills as unusual?
That's an interesting question. At the moment, we have a skills shortage. So, what would I do if I needed a certain accredited security part of my business? Well, I would go to a company that would provide that service. Why would I hire someone and retrain them? And then they'll leave anyway, eventually. It won't be a job forever. And then it leaves another hole for me to fill, and there's no point. That service should be delivered. But moving forward, it's a complicated beast. It's the whole point, I think, of an MSS or MSP or MSSP or whatever acronym you want to call a service provider in the future. That their core should be the glue with the client, because they are going to be managing the delivery of said services. It'll be them commissioning NetScout to go in to do certain work, etc. It won't be the client. So the end of the MSSP or the MSP or the other ones, they become the orchestra conductor. That's quite literally probably the most crudest analogy I can come up with. They will ensure that every element of that project happens, but they have ultimate responsibility, and the client will blame them ultimately for any issues that arise. So in all fairness, then actually, if you get that collaboration between a B2B play for a B2C business service, then that's just a beautiful thing, because you have total ownership of it without the cost base, really, and less risk than doing it yourself. And the client receives a better service. So that, to me, is the way forward. I can't see anything else.
But it does sound like convergence has value.
It does.
And therefore, does that mean that everyone's a VAR, even if there's limited reselling, everyone that succeeds can resell? Because an MSP would have no problem reselling or selling training.
I think that, sorry,
No, carry on.
I think that's a key part. Continuing your theme, I think that's the upstream bit where the MSSP, in order for them to reduce their risk, because the accountability they're now adopting, it's part of that education back into the customer. And back to my point, cyber as part of the cultural DNA, I would extend that, and I have conversations with boards all the time. Cybersecurity is the new business operating model, because people are now digitally aware. And if you can talk in a competent way and encourage them onto your digital services, everything's being surfaced in that way, then you're part of the way there. And the MSSP is bringing that education, that knowledge transfer. I think it's a key part of that formula.
So then, looking forward, love futurology, always interesting to just pluck ideas out of the air. What do you think tomorrow's MSS or MSP is going to want to start to work with or start to bundle? Robots? I mean, I'm just plucking things out of the air. What's next in this modernization piece?
So there's something that Neil mentioned a few minutes ago, which I think is going to help shape what the managed service provider landscape will look like over the coming years. And that is not necessarily technology driven, but you're going to have other pressures like employment laws, 4-day weeks, all of these things that small businesses will struggle to be able to provide, increased salaries.
Diversity,
inclusivity. If you look at the MSP landscape currently at the moment, and I used to be on the committee for the CompTIA in the UK, and we had good visibility of what the MSP landscape looks like in the UK. And in the main, it was probably made up of 2,000 or 3,000 MSPs that had less than 10 employees kind of size. Unfortunately, I think that's going to change moving forward in a way that you either have to be totally focused on maybe one technology, like say it could be an application type technology like Salesforce or lots of others out there, but you become, like Power BI, or there's a CRM solution, whatever one you choose for, you become highly specialized in that, help the customer to integrate that into the business, do some after training and all that kind of thing. Or you have to become a much bigger MSP, because you need to then be able to offer the kind of employment things that have to go on, imposed on you by both governments and also by people, where you want that work-life balance. They want to work from home, they want to do this, they want to do that. How can you deliver that with such a small amount of people? And I think that's where the pressures will come from. Yeah. And I think businesses and MSPs will have to grow, and I think there'll be a lot of M&A activity over the coming years, as those kind of managed service providers need to grow to maybe 100 type of staff numbers, so that you can actually compete and operate in that space. And then these smaller ones, if you don't want to have a much bigger MSP environment, you then have to then focus very laser-like into specific areas of knowledge and capability.
So maybe not just the legal MSP or the healthcare MSP, but even more specialized.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, that's only my view. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's lots of people out there who will have completely different views on how things are going to evolve, but that's maybe what I see at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. But I'll use yet another crass analogy because I'm full of them. Is the fact that MSPs should be considering themselves like cars, right? They've got their product car, whatever that car that they have sold as a service or leased to somebody, right? Every car every year gets upgraded with elements that were costed the previous model, but given to the next model above. So let's make it easy because there's a million and one options. I get a car today. It's got everything I need in it. I've got iPhone compatibility, everything on. And however, next year I want facial recognition. So it will monitor if I'm stressed or not stressed or this or that or the other. But I can pay for that now. But actually, if I wait another year, it'll be part of the base product set. And the same with security, right? This is ever evolving. And in every part of every business, this is exactly the same template. You look at what the public demand to have, including in your product set. The following year, it's typically given away as a nice to have extra, as you know, you've bought this new car, so I'm going to give you that for free, right? You paid for it last year, but we'll forget about that. But this year, public demand says that will make me sell more cars, right? So, and IT is no different from that industry, apart from it's even more key to get it right because we're all talking about visibility of data of your organization or your level of individual. You need to safeguard it. Just like a car, you put all the airbags around it, you're safeguarding that person. Same thing, but the optional extras we should be giving away, and everybody should be seeding their services with more inclusive elements that the company demands every year. I mean, we're just so used to that not being done in IT and charging a fortune every year for multi-year contract.
Well, it's one of the challenges we're seeing from cloud.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
your point. And we're in an evergreen world with cloud, where the providers, the AMG of Amazon, Microsoft, Googles of this world and others, are introducing new functionality into existing product suites that you're already licensed for, and just lighting it up. So this is a challenge for the independents, but it's also an opportunity for them because organizations have to also maintain cadence with that change. And I think it was 1,700 core changes Amazon made last year to their platform. You know, that's not insignificant when you think we're trying to maintain security across your estate and they're getting large. So how do you know you're missing a trick? How do you know some of those changes aren't giving indirect attack vectors to new, thoroughly educated troublemakers out there who don't have to worry about compliance and they can just crack on? And it's this new world that we're moving into where I think MSPs, managed service and security providers have huge opportunity because organizations just can't stack the skills, just
they can't flex something.
Exactly.
Which might mean that they also start bundling man guarding.
You never know.
You never know.
Virtual man guarding.
Metaverse.
The number of board meetings we go into and we get executives now asking for guidance, not just for them, because they're a vanguard asset of an organization and they do invariably a lot more traveling and their cyber hygiene, to be honest, tends to be almost the worst in the organization, but down into their families, because their families are now attack vectors into corporations. And you've got to look at that supply chain dimension as we talk about stitching these new services together. And how do we demonstrate that credibility to customers? When a customer looks at this wonderful service offering, where you're providing sort of the glue, as we talked about, for all these myriad of specialist service providers, how can you communicate that supply chain integrity to a customer? I think the insurance industry has a huge role to play here because they can drive that. The old money offset risk by insurance is what is a key part of that. Cyber insurance, it's one of the fastest growing markets in insurance. So, there are lots of exciting dimensions here, which I can go off like a cluster grenade. Well, you won't have to use them. You get where I'm going from.
But talking about your man guarding, you can see in 10 years that robotics could have an impact on man guarding and drones.
Maybe
particularly large, critical infrastructure environments and anything where you've got huge factories and huge areas to cover. It would be easy to see how robotics can augment and improve the security posture of quite a large environment, because humans are constrained by how fast they can get around a campus or a site. Robotics 24/7, they'll just keep going. And as you find in gardening with these automated lawnmowers now, they go back, charge themselves and come back out. Robots would do the same.
Well, I have to be careful because I had a physical security robotics specialist come onto the Circuit Magazine podcast, and we only asked how a bodyguard might have a buddy that was a robot, and even that got some fan mail.
I can imagine.
So yeah, but this is interesting, and I appreciate looking at it from this perspective. Obviously, it's nice to do in this format, nice to be in the monument and do this Boardroom. But the questions really have developed over the 6 years of this forum. At the beginning, yes, we might have had some quite brutal panels. We did Man Guard meet CISO. That was kind of interesting. We said, well, what on earth would we have to talk about? And we kind of went through hospitality and threat intelligence and things like that. So maybe a nice point to finish on. I'll tell you what, I'll start with you, Ian. I'll work my way down. What are we going to be talking about next year, or August in Phoenix, the very same type of event? But anyway, next year, what are we going to be talking about when we talk convergence?
Well, I think next year will be more of the same, but I think we will have moved the dial a bit more, and we may have a little bit more evidence about how the MSP and the MSSP market has progressed. And we can just reflect on whether, what we're talking about today actually is come to fruition, or we can start to see more evidence of that. But certainly if you were to move that forward to say 2030, that's going to be a completely different kind of conversation in 8 years' time.
Absolutely. And aside, some of you, will know that I ran exclusively military events, and for 10 years, the events world dined out on network-centric warfare. It's basically the same thing. It's modernization. And now you would not hesitate to imagine that there was some sort of computer on the battlefield. Nigel, where are we going to be going with it next time? Are there any panels that perhaps we should integrate into a conference such as this?
I think telco, looking back and then to the future, what's happening in telecoms. I remember local loop unbundling did a lot of work with BT in those days, and the convergence of fixed line, broadband, and now mobile. And now we're seeing the fracturing of that sort of almost a monopoly that those big players had, where anyone can almost become telco provider. Yes, it has privacy and other regulatory implications, which Microsoft struggled with, but we see how that has already softened. But I think we're going to see the almost total disappearance of traditional plain old telephones, the POTS, fixed wire telecoms. I think the pandemic has seen us move to mobile at a ferocious pace. So I think it's going to be very interesting having those discussions and how telco actually becomes more embedded, just almost in a reflexive way in everything that we do digitally. And that brings its own challenges, because it's not just voice anymore, it's video. And that brings me to my second point, and this is more looking to the future, and it's building on some of the challenges we're already seeing in the social media sphere with the artificial reproduction of what are almost indistinguishable videos of high-profile individuals making statements, on lecterns. You can't tell the difference now. This social media dilemma we have over the reality of information, and it's not just static, textual, or audible, it's visual now. We can no longer trust what we're seeing, hearing, or reading. And I think this is...
We haven't much.
Well, we could. There have been days, years in the past where we could trust the facts that we heard. We trusted the people because that's what they were built on, the honesty and integrity that they pervade across the early communication channels. Now, we have a fundamental breakdown in trust around knowledge, information, and this is going to be the biggest challenge that we've got ahead of us.
Maybe everyone will have their own individual NFT, and every time they make a speech, we have to refer it back to the NFT to find some provenance. I am talking completely out of my comfort zone.
You've actually, this is something, it's a pet subject of mine, and I think individuals will end up with curators who actually curate the information they get presented with. So we will have personal filters. These personal filters will be tuned to match what our tolerance is to perhaps trash out there, in our information stream.
Like the clip it on steroids. Do you remember the little clip it?
No, I'm maybe somewhere in the future. But I think it's a bit like the bots. We've got trading bots out there now, which you can download without having to be party. Neil. And these are going to be interesting spaces because then that brings a whole new attack surface for troublemakers. You imagine compromising people's personal digital assistants who now become the gatekeepers to their minds in terms of what you're fed and what actually drives your next step.
But I think just quickly, just adding to that though, I can see quite quickly smart companies reacting to that and creating platforms in which they will do multiple different checks on the integrity of that video. So they will take different parts and say, well, was that person actually at that event? And there'll be other news agencies and there'll be lots of stuff that you can actually broker various bits of information and quickly validate whether that's actually a legitimate video.
Various scientists appeared from nowhere when you had to have certification and domains, the integrity of that, and exactly these are surface areas that are going to be exciting.
The touch paper or the touch points for your data are so multiple now. It's so much easier to get a better understanding of where it is, who's accessing it, and where to go, and because it's not just one system that's going to access a lot of your data. If you had a conglomerate of all of those touch points to get more of a geographical kind of or geolocation of your data, or what's doing, how it's being accessed, put that together, that would work quite well. I mean, the car manufacturers do that, right? So, and that's what they're beaming the data from one car to another, even different manufacturers. Using their own little hotspots within the car. So, and that's your data of how fast you've driven. Maybe you've got to do that red light. Or maybe you shouldn't have done 90 on the M4, right?
And now
and that will affect your insurance premium.
And the speed
There's
limit.
going to be an API out to that. So your insurance company, sorry, you've been driving really fast. You have to pay more.
Well, the speed limiters are now being introduced as standard, aren't they?
So it's going to put a premium on cars that predate that. So you know.
Oh no, but then you'll be forced to use the E5 fuel, so that will be more expensive.
Yes,
I know.
And then the next thing that
But you never expected this from the MSS, did you? No. But this is good, and this is obviously good food for thought for me. So I'm very grateful because I want to build new and exciting agendas. Obviously, we've got to be sure that no one's a deep fake for the next one, or a cat. That's a lovely pandemic motif. But I think this is good fun. So, all right, Ian, Nigel, and Neil. Thank you for being such great panelists. I look forward to seeing you in our little social event very soon. And yes, big virtual round of applause.
Thanks, Colin.
thanks.